It's rare that a player gets to unveil his own statue more than 40 years after he last played for the club. But Alfredo Di Stefano is exactly that, a rare player, the absolute godfather of Real Madrid, and for many, the greatest player of all time.
Di Stefano, my hero. For me, he was the most complete footballer in history. That's my opinion.
Alfredo was just a born winner, the greatest in the world, without a doubt.
Pelé is the most naturally gifted. Maradona could claim to be the best player the world's ever seen. But whenever I'm asked, I always say, if I had to be anybody playing in another career, it would be Alfredo Di Stefano.
I saw this figure, all dressed in white. For me, he was football's god, someone incredible.
He was just the most sensational footballer, and character, and personality, and leader.
For us, he was like a god. A sporting god.
It's a monument to a man who won 5 consecutive European Cups and 8 Spanish League titles with Real Madrid. Di Stefano scored 216 goals in 282 appearances.
He could defend, he could attack, he could run, he could head the ball, and use both right and left feet. He played all over the pitch. He was the most complete player ever, something I've never seen anywhere else. And I've seen a lot of players.
I remember watching him from up in the terraces once, and I was looking down. I thought, who is that? Who's that man? He's got the ball all the time, you know. He takes it from the goalkeeper, the fullbacks, the midfield. Everything's happening around him.
Well, I never considered myself a star. I always thought of myself as a football player, a professional. I knew that the ball just wasn't there waiting for me. If I didn't have it, I'd go and look for it. I just worked hard, I had a certain will to win and team spirit. That's what my game was all about.
Di Stefano's story started a world away in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Alfredo was the eldest of 3 children who grew up in the Barajas district, the industrial heart of the city, the port which connected South America to Europe, and where football had made its first inroads into South America.
I started playing in the street. I love football, and there was very little traffic where I lived. No cars or trucks, just horse-drawn carriages. So we played in the streets, and little by little, people started to notice my talent. And at the age of 15, I found myself playing for River Plate.
Casi sobre la hora de STEFANO, igual al marcador del primer tiempo.
Back in those days, they used to call River Plate the machine. And that's because when the train used to pass behind the stadium, the guard would sound his horn. River were champions of Argentina for many years, producing some excellent players. It was a remarkable football factory that produced some great talents.
I think he played an important part in changing the technique of South American football. In those days, River Plate's style was based on touch and dribbling, whereas Alfredo's football was based on speed, on quick moves. And, in my opinion, he quickly became, without a doubt, the most accomplished player in the history of the game.
After a year on loan at Buenos Aires neighbours Huracan, Di Stefano stepped back into La Máquina forward line at River Plate. It was a devastating combination that could have dominated Argentina for years to come, but everything was about to change for the talented youngster.
There was a big problem in Argentina. There were lots of clubs in the capital city, and obviously there wasn't enough money for everybody. Some clubs paid the players, some others didn't. So there was a demonstration organised by the first team players from the capital, and there was a general strike that lasted for 8 months.
So in 1949, Di Stefano, along with many other players from around the world, went to play in Colombia. He played for the side they called the Blue Ballet, Millonarios of Bogotá.
Yo me fui de River, me fui a Millonarios de Colombia. Porque Colombia estaba separada.
I went from River Plate to Millonarios of Colombia because Colombia wasn't under the jurisdiction of FIFA. And it turned out to be a very good league, because some teams had Brazilian players, others had Paraguayan players, and others had Argentinians. It was almost like a World Cup. And the fans responded well. And we were happy because we developed a great footballing era in Colombia.
Di Stefano was the star player in a legendary Millonarios side. They won 4 league titles, with him scoring 267 goals in 292 games. But that promised to be the last chapter in his career as he headed back to Argentina.
In 1953, I went back to Buenos Aires. I was thinking about doing something else because I'd had enough of football. It was then that some Catalan football directors came to Argentina. I was painting the roof of a house, and I assume that's where the Barcelona directors got it wrong, because instead of going to Colombia, they went to see River in Buenos Aires. And that's when the story became a kind of international affair.
In Barcelona, it will always be remembered as the Di Stefano affair. They see it as the time, perhaps with pressure from the Franco government, when Madrid hijacked a player that had signed for Barcelona. But that deal was with River Plate and wasn't recognised by the Spanish FA. Half a century later, there's still anger in Barcelona, but that's how the Blonde Arrow became a Real Madrid player.
Yo tuve la suerte de que tuviera un buen equipo.
I was lucky enough to play with a good team. In the end, we managed to win the league, and Real hadn't been champions for 21 years. Well, the Blonde Arrow was in town. That was me, La Saeta. And with the arrival of some others, we made up a very good team, a winning side.
As fate would have it, Di Stefano's first goal for Real Madrid came against Barcelona, as Madrid embarked on the most successful period of their history. Real were gathering a group of talented players like Gento and Copa, but it was Don Alfredo who really made the difference.
Alfredo was a born champion. He was born to win, and he lived only for football. He was obsessed with one thing: winning, 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 and nothing else.
At that time, a new tournament was emerging that was to be called the European Cup. Real Madrid made it to the first final, where they beat Stade de Reims 4-3. Di Stefano made their name.
This is a fantastic competition, and we're really happy to have been the pioneers of such a great event.
In the next year's final, the Italians, Fiorentina, provided the opposition. This time Madrid were at home in the Santiago Bernabeu stadium. In a 2-0 win, Di Stefano played a crucial part.
Segunda vez el Real Madrid lleva a sus vitrinas desde las manos de este pundonoroso capitán la hermosa copa.
The team kept getting better and better. We signed new players, quality players, because at the same time, the other European teams were improving too. We were aware of our power and potential, and one phrase we used seems to sum it all up: the power of a bull at home and the power of a bull in a foreign field.
1958 and another European Cup final, this time in Brussels against AC Milan.
That match just ebbed and flowed. It was a very difficult match, and anyone could have won. because Milan had brought in some excellent players. And in the end, we won in extra time, 3-2, through a goal by Gento.
Ya se ha jugado la primera parte de la prórroga sin resolución y estamos en el minuto 3 de la segunda. Consecutivo frente a un rival noble y poderoso.
But in Madrid. So we drove past the fans in an open-top car, and everyone was cheering.
At the club, there was a constant drive to achieve more, to do even better. There was the desire to keep on winning trophies, to keep striving to make the club more and more prestigious. And then people started to believe that this club should really become a dominant force around the world. And that's what happened.
Real Madrid just marched on. 2-0 win to give Real Madrid their 4th consecutive title. But the most memorable match of them all came a year later in Glasgow.
That match in Glasgow was just a fantastic show. There were 135,000 people watching. The fans were singing a song that went, "Todos queremos más," we all want more. So after the first title, it was, we all want more. The second title, Todos queremos más. And then we got to the 5th.
For many people, that 5th final against Eintracht Frankfurt was the best match in the history of football.
I think that match in Glasgow would be difficult to repeat.
That match was extraordinary because we were all over the age of 30 and people thought that we were probably a little too old by then. In addition to that, we were facing Eintracht Frankfurt for the first goal of the match. But on the pitch, we said to each other that we just couldn't let them win. There was an enormous crowd, and it was amazing to enjoy that moment together, the players and supporters. It really was a marvellous match.
It was a phenomenal achievement by Real Madrid, and they owed so much to La Saeta, the blonde arrow, the dominant force of their team, Alfredo Di Stefano, who scored in every final.
The first 5 European Cups he won with Real Madrid, and the teams changed, and he went through from the beginning of it to the end of it, and his period at Real Madrid probably gave Real Madrid the mystique that they have now.
It all started with Alfredo. I would say that he represents the beginning of everything. The old Madrid team was nothing more than an average side, but when he arrived, we started to win everything. That's how we became famous all over the world. Real Madrid, a winning team.
He had an effect both on and off the pitch. On the pitch, because he was everywhere. There wasn't a particular area where he liked to play. Off the pitch, he showed, like no one else, how much he respected and loved the image of Real Madrid. And he transmitted that sense of respect to all his teammates.
I think Spain and the city of Madrid became famous because of Real, especially in Europe. You would go abroad and the kids would know all about the club. They'd go crazy when you offered them a team badge. Because even the kids knew that Real Madrid were the greatest team around.
By now, it was the classic Real Madrid forward line of Puskás, Gento and Real, with Santa Maria and Pachín further behind them. But as Real Madrid became the greatest team on earth, one man stood out as their symbol, Alfredo Di Stefano.
Back when I was a boy, I'd watch all the finals that Real Madrid won, and he was the heartbeat of that side. He'd be in defence, attack, midfield. He was everywhere. We were fascinated by him, especially in a time when you didn't see much international football. So the day after a big final, we'd all be playing football in the playground at school, pretending to be Real Madrid players.
Back in Africa, we'd always dreamed about playing Real Madrid. We'd heard of them, winners of the European Cup. And of course, Di Stefano, my hero.
When the time came for Real to actually lose a game in Europe, fate couldn't have been crueler. Their first defeat came against Barcelona in 1961. But Di Stefano was back in the final in 1962, playing against Eusebio's Benfica.
One of the things I remember most from that final was that I asked Di Stefano if I could have his shirt. I said, "Sir, could I please have your shirt? As back in Africa, my father and brothers always said what a great player you were. So I'd like to have your shirt." So even when we'd won the game and we'd won the European Cup, the most important thing for me was the shirt.
Real Madrid had already won 5 European Cups, and I think that Europe didn't want Real to win again. They wanted a new king.
2 years later, Sandro Mazzola was in the Inter Milan side that took on Madrid in the final.
So when I found myself up against Real Madrid in that final, I remember being in the tunnel before the game, and it was badly lit. But I saw that figure dressed all in white, and I thought he was 2 metres tall. I saw him like a god of football, something incredible. So much so that before the game I stopped and stared at him, until my teammate Luis Suarez, who played in several finals, said to me, "Oi, kid, we're going to play a football match. Are you just going to stare at Alfredo?" So that woke me up.
Mazzola was soon on his game though, scoring twice as Inter beat Madrid 3-1 in Vienna.
I remember when I scored in the 42nd minute. In my head, the game was over. I'd scored against Real Madrid. It was a dream come true, something that I could only have imagined just 2 or 3 years before.
After more than 10 years at Real Madrid and at the age of 38, Di Stefano spent a further 2 years with Espanyol de Barcelona. He then went into management, spending 4 years at Valencia, but it was always going to be difficult to match the success he'd enjoyed in his playing days.
Being a coach just isn't the same as being a player. It's more like the hen with her chicks. The hen has to look after her chicks, and that's what the manager has to do. He has to keep them happy, cheerful, and help them cultivate the team spirit.
Di Stefano did have some success as a coach, winning titles with Boca Juniors, River Plate and Valencia, but in the end it just wasn't the same as being a player.
As a player I could be creative, as a manager I couldn't.
The abiding memory of Alfredo Di Stefano will always be as a phenomenal player. Titles in his time there. So Di Stefano's contribution is the biggest reason why FIFA named Real Madrid the team of the 20th century.
FIFA nominated us the team of the century. Apart from winning La Liga and the Spanish Cup, Real Madrid won 5 consecutive European Cups, and until today we've won a total of 9. From the days when it was just a small side, the team went on to become a great club, and that's why FIFA said it's the team of the century.
It's no exaggeration to say that it was Di Stefano's era that set the standards for the Madridistas.
That's the way it has to be. To continue the great legacy of this club, you need success. And without these triumphs, it's like a light that goes out.
Known around the club as Don Alfredo, he's the man that played for Argentina, Colombia and Spain. Nowadays, Real Madrid are one of the world's biggest clubs. But whenever there's a big footballing event in the Spanish capital, guess who's there at the centre?
I'm the president of the Veterans Association for the older players. And in addition to that, I was nominated honorary president of the club. I was a little embarrassed about that because I thought I didn't deserve it, but you should never refuse an award. And therefore, I'm now pleased that they gave it to me.
He still represents the image of this club. He was nominated honorary president, and of course, there were no doubts about that decision. The truth is, he is still the symbol of Real Madrid. In fact, wherever Alfredo goes, there are lots of people who show a big interest in him. Young fans, journalists, everyone. He still has great appeal, despite his age and despite the fact that he stopped playing a long time ago.
That Di Stefano is Madrid's greatest ever player is beyond question for many, but one person isn't quite convinced.
I don't consider myself the most important player of Real Madrid's history. I've always played for the team, but I've been lucky to play as a centre-forward, and the centre-forward is the man who scores the goals. And people always admire the player who scores the goals. But this player has achieved that thanks to the efforts of the defence. That's how things happen. You have to be a good person to succeed.
Di Stefano may be modest about his contribution, but many others, especially his teammates, are ready to pay him the ultimate tribute.
We absolutely adore Alfredo. For us, he's like a god. We spend as much time as possible with him as we admire him from all points of view. We're not talking just about the player now, but also about the man. He's been special to us. We've spent a lot of years together. In fact, we almost spent more time with one another than with our wives and our families. To us, he's been the greatest thing that could have happened.
There are so many memories. He was always a winner, and he had so much success year after year. And he deserved it all. Nothing was given to him. He achieved it all through dedication and fighting for the colours of his team.
Alfredo Di Stefano, the greatest player that ever lived? Quite possibly. Whichever way, the man himself is pretty satisfied.
Well, I can't complain really. Despite my old age, I'm still here, alive and kicking and talking to you. I should thank the fans for that, and obviously, someone above us all. He's the one I should thank.
No?